Hello, everybody. We're going to use the microphone tonight because we have a packed house. If we need extra seating, we have chairs in the cafe that we can pull over. And then for those of you who are here from English 362, you have that right? Is that your, there's a sign-in sheet on that table, so just hit that up before you leave. So you get credit for being here at this amazing event. Good evening and welcome to Roundabout Books. My name is Julie and I'm the events manager here for the store. First of all, we want to take this opportunity to acknowledge that our bookstore resides on the ancestral unceded land of the Confederate Tribes of Warm Springs. In our immediate area are also the unceded lands of the Confederate Tribes of Siletz Indians and the Tribes of Grand Ronde. We encourage everyone to learn more about the land you occupy and the story of its peoples. Our local section has many of those books, and if there's a particular one you're looking for, we'd be happy to look it up and get it for you. And then a quick reminder of some upcoming events. If you like or write spooky poetry, join us on Sunday, October 30th for a special spooky poetry slam. We still have space for readers and attendees, so please check out our website. And then the following day is our 6th anniversary on Monday, October 31st. So we will have costumes, cookies, and hot cider all day. So be sure to visit Roundabout Bookshop for more information on our events and book clubs. We are recording this event for our YouTube channel where you can see all of our events back to May of 2020. One nice thing about the pandemic is those events now live in perpetuity thanks to Zoom. Tonight we are so excited to welcome 3 Oregon poets for a discussion about their new books. I'm going to give you a little bit of background, although I'm sure most of you know these lovely ladies. Jennifer is an assistant professor. Can you wave as I say your name to be weird? Okay. And for the camera. Is assistant professor of American Studies and MFA program coordinator at Oregon State University Cascades. She has lived in Cyprus, Turkey, Denmark, Austria, and the Basque Coast. A proud native Californian.
Oh, you're not supposed to read that part.
It's in your bio, baby. It's on our website. She currently lives in Bend, Oregon with her husband and the cat. Am I going to say it, Belmonte? Yeah. Oh yeah, that's a great name for a cat. Oh, that's great. Brittney Corrigan is the author of 3 previous books of poetry, Breaking, Navigation, and 40 Weeks. Corrigan was raised in Colorado and has lived in Portland, Oregon for the past 3 decades, where she is an alumna and employee of Reed College. She is currently at work on her first short story collection. And then, just run it back here because it's just easier for me. Irene is the author of Committal, Found, and Spare Change, which is what we're going to be talking about tonight. Her work has appeared in the Feminist Wire, Phoebe, Cathexis, Northwest Press, The Rumpus, Denver Quarterly, Voice Catcher, and elsewhere. She co-edits the Stay Project and facilitates creative writing workshops in community and educational settings and at a regional prison, as well as for Blank Pages workshops in Oregon, where she lives with her people and a corgi.
And she's the latest, one of the latest members of the editorial board for Airlie Press. First to know.
So Jennifer, I'm going to pass this off to you to get us started.
Oh, okay, sure.
Well, first thing I think we're just going to start with is tell us a little bit about your newest publication, what inspired it, what it's like to be a published author now. We're just going to go down the line.
Okay. Do this. Do you want me to stand? Do you want me to stand? I'm so excited to be here, by the way, because the first time that I came in this bookshop, I looked around and I said, I have to do a reading in here. And then I stalked Cassie and Julie and made them listen to me and really strong-armed them into organizing this event with my 2 colleagues here. And I'm just thrilled. I love this shop. If you haven't been here before, take some time to look around because it's just lovely. Such a well-curated shop. I'm very excited to talk to you guys about this book, which just came out on the 1st of this month. It's called Keşke. So the S with the little tail, we pronounce it like an SH in English. And it's a Turkish word. And in Turkish, this word expresses a wish or a longing. In English, you can translate it sort of like saying, if only, if only. And it was a word that I learned during my 5 years living and working in Turkey. I don't have like an ancestral biological connection to Turkey. And while this book talks about some of my experiences there, I always want to preface by saying that I'm not speaking for Turkish people in this book. I'm really speaking through a lens of my own experience and also mythology. So one of the big projects in this book is an epic poem that's a long poem cut into 25 different sections. And one of the points of inspiration for that was traveling around that region of the world in the Mediterranean, particularly during the summer or the year of 2016. I found myself, I kept coming up against or encountering these different sites that advertise themselves as being such and such place from the Odyssey or the Iliad by Homer. And so inspired by, being shown this little crevice in a wall that was, oh, this was Calypso's cave, I went back to those texts and I reread them. But it was very different reading them, as an adult woman than it was reading them in high school or as a college student. And I had a very different lens on these stories. And I was particularly intrigued by the story of Calypso, and probably because I was at this island off the coast of Malta that was supposedly, her island. And I went back and I read that story and I was like, wow, I just don't know if I quite believe this version of the story that we get through Homer and others. So I was thinking about this character of this woman who does everything she can to welcome Odysseus, the hero, right? Who we're told is tall and attractive, and he's charismatic, he's well-spoken, and he shows up on her island like in a state of distress. She helps him out, she helps out all his sailors, and then supposedly he ends up staying against his will for 7 years on this island. And I'm like, beautiful immortal goddess willing to do anything to help you and your men, like attractive, charismatic young man. Was Odysseus really there against his will? Are we meant to believe that he literally spent every night crying about his wife, Penelope? And so I just started to think about that story from a different angle. And so part of the Keşke, it's about longing and it's about wishes, but it's also about female desire and sort of reclaiming the space of female desire in the classic epic, but also refracted through my own personal experiences during this time in Turkey. And one of the other major events that inspired this book was the failed coup attempt on July 15th of 2016. That happened both in Istanbul and in Ankara, where I was living in the capital city of Turkey. And so also being put into a state of emergency, and those weeks and months following those bombings and the coup attempt when things felt very precarious is another sort of way into the book. So it's part mythology, and it's part commentary on contemporary global politics. So I think that was too long of an intro, but I just love talking about it. Okay.
Hi. First, thanks to the folks at Roundabout Books for having us here tonight. This is an absolutely perfect, wonderful little bookstore. I'm really excited to be here, and thanks for coming, all of you. So I'm much less professorly, and I'm going to speak from right here on the couch. So I'm going to be talking to you tonight, reading from this book, Daughters, which came out with Airlie Press last year at this time of year. And Daughters is a series of persona poems in the voices of daughters from various characters from mythology and folklore and pop culture. And I often get asked about how I got the idea for the book, or how these came to be. And what I say is that it started by, one of them just got written accidentally. I don't know where it came from. It was Scarecrow's daughter, and I just wrote her. And then I was like, oh, I haven't written persona poems for a while. This is kind of fun. I had written a bunch in college and then not written any for like 20 years. And then I was like, I think I'm going to do some more persona poems. And so I decided I was going to do one in the voice of Bigfoot, and wrote it, and it wasn't working, and it wasn't working at all. And I was like, you know what, maybe if I did it from the perspective of his daughter. And so I did that, totally changed the poem, and by complete accident, it ended up being the same exact length. It was six stanzas of 6 lines each. And so now that there were 2 of them, and they were exactly the same length, I was like, okay, I've got a project now. So I decided I was going to do 50 of them, and raised, 50, because otherwise I would keep doing this forever because they were so fun to do. But I had a list of probably 100, and I would write one, and then I would go back to the list and see who wanted to talk next. And some of them, just imagine the daughters just of, some of them are the daughters of folks in various professions, and some of them are just them speaking about their experience, and some of them have sort of another story going on underneath. And there's some feminist commentary in there, there's some other, the persona poems were a window into talking to things like some of them are about domestic violence, or living with an alcoholic parent, or various other issues that may not be my own experience, but that I still had something that I wanted to say about. And so the persona poems for me were a window into being able to speak about those issues. And I think persona poems too are an exercise in empathy, in putting yourself in someone else's shoes, and thinking about what their experience might be like without, hopefully without sort of co-opting that experience. So that was an interesting challenge while writing, is to make sure these poems were really me, even though they were in the voices of these daughters. So that was a little bit weird.
Like a middle ground.
Oh,
Heard. Rule of 3, composition. Thank you, Roundabout Books. Can't be said enough. I love hearing about other people's processes, and especially when they don't sound, crazy, when they start to make sense when you talk about them. I think because, as you were talking, Brittney, that idea of the persona poem, putting yourself in someone else's voice, is a hugely important contemporary experiment, I think, right now, without assuming that voice, right? That exploration. And as you know, as soon as you start to write a poem, it's going to tell you something different than what you thought ought to be going on. And that's the magic of it, right? That's the magic of the language that enters in if you open the door. Spare change, I'll do the little, that's this one. The first thing I actually want to say is something about this cover. Because the books that I've had the pleasure of being associated with so far have all been designed by one woman. She is a friend. She's a beautiful peer writer. She is also a fellow MFA OSU Cascades alum, Bridget Lewis. And one of the great things about talking to another writer who's an artist is that you give them words, and then they give you something else that's beautiful and exactly what you meant to say. So I'm grateful. Bridget's not here, but she's out there somewhere. Spare change has something in conversation, I think, thematically with both of these books, in that there is a what-if quality. A lot of these poems are sort of a reclamation of a grief that doesn't always happen in contemporary Catholic America, which is where I come from. That sort of has its finite moment, and then is supposed to move on. And we all know how that works out, right? But I think at some point I had a couple of moments, and I thought, well, what if I could have conversations, grown-up, contemporary, in-the-moment conversations with someone important to me who had died? What if we could just sit here and not even talk about, not to try to explain or to figure anything out, but to just have that moment that, to connect. But also, I think what this book is trying to do, Spare Change, is both a literal reference to a moment in time, and also this idea of incremental change and how impactful that is. Cue the butterfly. For me, as a poet, form is as important as anything else. Finding form, exploring form, letting the poem tell me what form it ultimately needs. I would probably revise every poem I've ever written, published or not, just to fool around with that again. But it's wonderful how it's this sort of stair-step quality for me in my process about form, and then the language starts to play in, and then informed by this emotion, and there's all these things that start to click into place until you have something. And a lot of this book came together very quickly. Not all of it, but definitely pieces of it. And I think it is because when you have the luxury of getting a minute, which is also very difficult in our time and space, and that door to creativity opens, a lot comes out.
Shall we read a little? Okay.
We're going to do selections.
Yeah.
And then we can just go to Q&A unless there's nothing else, because we have so many people here.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Okay.
Should we do like all me and then you, or like one and then one more?
Have a little run, two.
Pardon?
Do more than one.
Okay.
Let's wallow a little.
All right, let's wallow. This book is good for wallowing. Irene's going to help me with some of the reading. You know, the end of the Calypso story is, right? So 7 years pass. We're meant to believe Odysseus was there against his will for 7 years. And he finally decides that it's time to go back, right? And he's crying and whatever. And Calypso tries to convince him to stay, but he's like, no, I got to go back to my wife. And then she very graciously, and that's one of the words that comes up in the stories, that she graciously says, all right, okay, if you have to go, you have to go. I'm gonna give you wine, I'm gonna give you clothes, I'm gonna help build you rafts so that you can get out of here. So she gives him and his men all the stuff and then sends him off. And so I was also very intrigued by this idea of, like, you know, she's put up with this guy for 7 years, wants him to stay, you know, he ends up going back to his wife, and, you know, and she's so, like, helpful, you know, in sending him off. But, you know, what must it feel like to be the woman who's not chosen? And I think that's kind of, you know, the sort of Keşke, the sort of if only, what if, part of female desire. So I wanted to read the first poem. I don't really need a microphone to project. Do you want to do your... So most of these Keşke poems, they have multiple voices in them. As I was collaging some fragments from different translations of the Odyssey, and other random stuff worked its way in there from things I was reading. So there's a lot of collage work in these poems, and so it's really helpful to have another voice to read them. So Irene's going to help me. This is the first Keşke poem, Keşke 1. Start where she, prophecy, remains. Fragment, stone, pine, trust, coast, line, caves.
Calypso,
Behind the azure window,
the lovely goddess.
the wanderer, driven time and again off course, swept away,
By wind and wave,
wide, wet,
wine dark.
sea,
The bewitching sea nymph smiles at his words. Words, words.
withholds,
Stroking his arm,
water line, withdraw, advance, withdraw, where, woven, chiaroscuro, ocean tossed in,
her house.
cliff's dark crevasse. This small space widens, hours to days, form emerges as tidal rocks emerge,
From goddess,
captive, captured, breeze blows,
to storm.
beach wrecked, timber isle,
Be not deceived if I have veiled my look.
still air spins, epic from ruin. She scrawls walls, hunts history, sings.
What a rascal you are, with a devious mind, to think of speaking to me.
Now, cast net, cast spell, bind all wishes to conceal, cunning, she swears Keşke.
By this earth and the sky above.
This means the world.
Oh, goddess queen.
This is no beginning. Do I have one of my students who would like to volunteer to read with me? Amma, do you want to come?
So I need my own copy.
Sure. So go to page 51. Do you want to sit?
I want to do Irene's little perch.
Yeah,
Okay.
there you go. Yeah,
Go ahead.
The
It's
perch.
Yeah.
Performative perch. You really need, you know what?
I gotta do a
Spanish.
straddle.
Oh, all right.
It's a power straddle.
So there's a series of prose poems in this book that were written directly in the aftermath of the failed coup attempt. It's like a week after, 2 weeks after, a month after, 2 months after, and then I guess around 2 months after I stopped writing poems about it. And so this one is from that prose poem series, and it's called A Month After the Failed Military Coup. And interspersed in here are snippets from the screenplay of How to Tame Your Dragon. And if you want to know why, then we can talk about that afterwards. So what I suggest, is that you read everything that's in normal type, and I will read the parts from How to Tame Your Dragon.
That's good, because I think your Italicism and type another language.
Just that one part, yeah.
Okay. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
A month after the failed military coup, you're back on the southern coast, a year older.
Oh, for the love of, I was a coward, I was weak, I wouldn't.
At Olympus Orange bungalows, they learn your name. It's too hot to run, so you swim in the sea, returning to rhythms from other decades.
Astrid punches.
The sea holds a diaper, a used tampon, a replica pirate ship, small fish that bite your feet if you stay still long enough. This is not a metaphor. So many spectrums of light, you.
Keşke.
A month after the failed military coup, the Turkish word of the day is
Bedava.
free, as in
Gratis.
not,
Libre.
as in,
Ikitana alana. Birtani bedava.
as in, buy democracy, get dictatorship for free. You finish the book as the binding falls apart.
It's 12 days north of hopeless.
860 pages of postmodern American poetry between you and the failed military coup.
Everything we know about you guys is wrong.
The dinner bell rings at 2000.
She drops the butt of her axe on his chest, and that's
Your alarm rings at 9 o'clock.
for everything else.
You know enough Turkish to know that most people mostly talk about
Dragon classifications. Strength class, fear class, mystery class.
all conversations always begin with
About the dragons.
you are constantly, insistently,
This reclusive dragon inhabits sea caves and dark tide pools. What happens to the leftover food? Do you live here?
you tell yourself that you sing along so you don't forget the sounds of America, but it's the sound of your own voice you're afraid of forgetting.
I do not want rice.
The country is in a 3-month state of emergency. You have been sober for 11 days.
Extremely dangerous, extremely dangerous. Kill on sight, kill on sight, kill on sight.
This might be a metaphor.
Never engage this dragon.
State of emergency means
Your only chance. Hide and pray it does not find you. So one more, and then I'll turn it over. This poem doesn't take place in Turkey. It's called 52 Albany Street. I've never been very good at being consistent. What are you most consistent at? Is a question you can't answer.
Through the windows, seagulls. 2 days before your 36th birthday, the Turkish word of the day, hastas olmak, to be crazy about. On 52 Albany Street, you tilt the camera to portrait mode. Hold it extremely close. St. Andrew's Square, fairy lights in gin. On the day before, the Turkish word of the day is birisini ekmek, to stand someone up. I want to capture, but landscape mode does not seem relevant here. You're still thinking about macro mode, only to have that super narrow slice, fruit market gallery, where you didn't see the Mexican artist from DF. And don't get me started on Mexico City, for real. At midnight, and all that bullshit, and the Turkish word of the day, your birthday, is gerçek, truth. You wonder about plurals, true or false, embrace just half-truths. True, you're still holding Keşke. False, I have almost no light. Tutkulu bir fotoğrafçıyım shows up a few days later. I'm a passionate photographer. True, you almost always say you change the reservation anyway because there are no candles. You forget to wish what would have been Keşke. When you wake up the next day, a foamy wave reaching towards the lens, the Turkish word of the day looks like his, feelings. False. Sample sentence. Hislerimiz hakkında konuşmamız gerek. We need to talk about our feelings. But the endless sea and darkening sky. It's 10:36 a.m. on a Tuesday in August, and at 52 Albany Street, the rain falls softly and softly falls upon all the Northern Renaissance stone, and you still don't understand alliterative verse or how to talk about whiskey or where to go next. Thank you.
I'll attempt to use the microphone and read at the same time. So usually when I read, I plan down to the last second and know exactly which poems I'm going to read. And I decided to change it up tonight. One, because I have favorite daughters, and I tend to read them over and over, and it's good to let some of the other ones have a say. And two, because I know a lot of you out there have been reading and discussing the book. So I'm going to read 3 daughters, and I'm going to take requests. So, which one do you want to hear? Da, da, da.
Don't be shy.
Yes?
Not daughter.
Okay, so this is perfect because Not Daughter has never been read out loud at a reading before. So Not Daughter, so as I said, this poem had 50, or this book had 50 poems. And 49 of these are the original 50. And over the course of the production of this book, my younger child came out as non-binary. The book was originally dedicated to them, and they said, I don't want this to be dedicated to me anymore because I'm not a daughter. And I said, okay, of course. And I said, can I write you a poem? And so I wrote this poem for them and had them read it and then asked them if I could put it in the collection. And they said yes, and we're pretty excited about it. So that this poem is for my kiddo. So. Got it. All right. Not Daughter. This body is one body in a world of bodies that have never been one thing, and I am certain have never been just two. This person, once sorted, is now unsorted, is neither one nor the other. A chimera butterfly unfurls 2 variant sets of wings. This body has 2 of some parts and 1 of others, but has always been one body, has always been mine. This person, renamed, reclaimed by me in one word that turns 2 categories to the kaleidoscopic compound eyes of bees. This body will not be cocooned, will not be hived, will be worn in one world more than one way. There is more than one kind of world. This person, made of two, birthed by one, who is a daughter of a daughter, but I am not daughter. I am remade, unshelled. I'll flower however I choose. All right, who's next? Yeah.
Ooh.
Okay. So, Bigfoot's daughter. I love to read in the Pacific Northwest because she's my Pacific Northwest girl. So, Bigfoot's daughter or Sasquatch's daughter.
Sorry,
She could go.
I don't know.
Yeah. She could be Sasquatch's daughter just as well. All right, Bigfoot's daughter. You want to believe in the bulk and brown of him reeling through the thicket. That flash you thought you saw, the eyes that spun. You want terror to walk beside you. You want the wild rush of escape. You want the story. You want to be alone with your fear, all of it true. Your heart loud like a woodpecker striking the trees that seem no longer peaceful, but sentient and poised to uproot. That cry in the woods that swallows all other sound. But listen, what I want you to hear is birdsong, the lifting that comes from such beauty, the way the trills and warbles sift through the stalling rain, a light on the ghosts of our breath, congregate and hover as the forest hums. My father, he is fine-furred and tawny, eyes green as fiddlehead ferns. Tangled and swift with his stories, his laughter sweeps through the undergrowth, bends you aside. I place my small footprints in his footprints, leave you stunned. If you watch the edges of his heart gentle forth through his body, soft and blurred and glowing, will you change your mind about the monster? Witness the glisten and tremble, the moon gazing down on the paws of the lake. Like that, the dark not so complete. My father, I ride on his shoulders, bring the sky down with my singing, fill your chest with a joy you can't explain. We can make you believe what you saw in the woods is something fierce and secret, the story of your own longing, but not yours to claim. One more daughter. Oh, yeah. So I call her my crowd favorite, my hit song, pun intended. Yeah.
But it's topical.
But it's topical, and yeah, she's talking to Keşke for sure.
Yeah.
So here we go. One of those poets thumbing through my book now. I said I'd never do that. That's why I have my sticky notes. All right, Siren's daughter. Our songs are not for you. My mother didn't teach me to lilt a lyric from my throat, to crest a note from my tongue, in order to enthrall or summon a man. Such conceit, to think a goddess would sing of men's deeds. We sing for the same reason cranes sing, or the deepening wails, or a whole fierce chorus of wolves. I wish all of you would bind your rough and yearning bodies to the masts of your figure-headed ships, sails abeat in the salty wind breaking the waves. Because, truth be told, I've had enough of your maddening inability to keep your hearts and hands to yourselves. Your excuses puddle round your boots. But still, you come. My mother says men cannot leave a thing of beauty to unfurl of its own accord. You must always lean in and pluck it, roots and all, no matter the withering. So, we have to make our homes among the sharpest rocks. We have to pick the roughest whirl of seas. And if we draw your ships to smithereens, well, That will not keep us from singing.
Microphone? I don't know. No.
I feel like you're on a talk show.
I know, I almost think cabin vibe going on here.
Yeah.
Blissfully without Dick Cabin. The difference between an albatross and a grappling hook is genre. The body beats up a hullabaloo to keep the mathematicians out of the liquor cabinet. Until I see your bones reform, I forget about the candles you light while everybody sleeps. Between you and me, the only way to hear ourselves seep in peace is by cranking up the fiction. A loose tooth means I know you're away and can't take my call. In another life, we are tusk to tusk in putrid battle, laughing and lifting our streaming nostrils to frighten the tourists. His brief pageant deprives us our banality. Art or gene pool, irony levels are dangerously high. What else goes into the water to keep us in stitches? Your liquid body rolls off you like snake oil, like thunder, like the electric charge that siphons up the air. Where's the other one? Hold on. Doesn't really matter, does it? Oh, I'll read my bit.
There you go.
Yeah. Sometimes in my perversity, I see our dead brother as a priest. See him peel back his black suit coat, release the button at his neck and take off his collar, lay it in a special bowl he keeps on the dresser. Vain about his feet, he'll have traded the ugly brogans for motorcycle boots. An homage to the hippie priest that took him and his buddies to see the summer of '42, back when a girl washing her hair was pornography, Shoes removed and down to his boxers, now hospital blue. He stands on his Jesus feet, long bones and knuckles buckled with ache, encased in steaming argyle. I imagine our brother knows everything about sex from that movie, that day, as he accepts when offered a sip of water. I really did want to read one of these, but I can't find it. What the heck? Flipping. The Lord is on retreat, working on his novel, as we struggle with such language as is left us. I understand you are busy imploding, must be exhausted from always keeping us safe from happenstance, a diagnosis. I trip with 3 sedated cats and 2 more to a small room which becomes your absence. How can you hide now with innards exposed to the dawn? Cue the chorus, so we know to leave laurels from the kale. Your way of changing the subject to stone is winning. If you were here in this terrible moment, you'd offer some medicinal bit of black. A horse walks into a are. An elephant passes through a pane of glass. A sliding door is a measure of seeing while warm. How much can we river the water as it smells so poorly? I had chipped my tooth on the laminate of this terrible moment, and how will we walk this off with souls so cracked and blistered? 3 sedated cats awaken with hangovers, hungry for the desire to paw the dogged jewel of you, casting stars across the ceiling over the bedspread. Night happens after everything. The word of our Father turns to elegy, to emptied. Who hears the clump leave his loosed grip, but me?
Just for the recording too, if someone answers a question, it's best to just repeat it, just so everyone can hear. But yeah, do we have questions from our audience?
Oh, I know there's questions. My students had to come up with them.
I have a question for Brittney. I was just wondering if a majority of the poems in Daughters are just characters, or if a lot of them are based off of your own life experience with your family?
So the question is if the majority of poems in Daughters are characters, or if they're based on my own experience. And with the exception of Not Daughter, all of them are characters. Yeah, so that was kind of the fun of the project. I had spent 20 years writing. I had done sort of some persona and sort of fairy tale revisioning kind of poems in college for my thesis, and then I spent 20 years writing what I guess would be called confessional poetry. Nobody calls it that anymore, but personal poetry for like 20 years. And then, so this was really a turn to something new and not about me at all. But of course, they're my lens on all of these different characters and situations. So, yeah, good question. Yeah.
Kind of piggybacking on Margo's question. In Unknown Daughter, that tombstone is based on a real cemetery in Washington. How did you stumble upon that in Baby Combo?
Okay, so amending to the last question, there's 2 that are real. I forgot about Unknown Daughter. So Unknown Daughter is written for an unnamed baby in the cemetery in Mineral, Washington, near Mount Rainier. And I was there doing a residency at Mineral School there, and spent lots of time walking the little cemetery and writing and reading there. And a friend said, you have to go find this gravestone. There's one gravestone of a Japanese baby there. So Mineral, Washington used to have a very large Japanese American population prior to World War II who were there to work in the lumber mill, and then of course all left or were made to leave when the internment camps were open, and they didn't come back. And there are, even though there was a large population there, the only one who has a gravestone there is this baby Kamo. And so I was really interested in that story and why only this baby and no one else, and where are the rest of them? Where are the people who were the lifeblood of this town who aren't there anymore, and why aren't they remembered here too? So I made an effort with a friend to try to find out what we could about this baby. Found very little, lost the family as we hit World War II. And so I don't know if the baby was a boy or a girl. I took some poetic license and made it a daughter to write the poem. But yeah, so that was based on a semi-true story as well.
Oh, we're talking about the date.
Oh, the date. So in trying to find, the friend who was told me to find the gravestone, it took me, it was flat and in a far corner of the cemetery, and it took me 3 days to find it, even though it was a very small cemetery, and I was walking it every day trying to find this stone because she knew it was there. And the day I found it turned out to be the birth/death date of the baby, 90, I know, right? 98 years, 97 years prior. So yeah, that was the other reason. It was sort of like I have to write about this experience. So So the cover art is by Andrea Couch, who's a contemporary living artist. She's from Michigan. And I've long loved her art, and for our cover designer, we just put together like, here's kind of the vibe I want of Daughters, and I put some Andrea Couch paintings in there just because she paints a lot of women in these sort of strange, surreal yet pastoral settings. And the designer was like, well, why don't we just try to get one? And so she was nice enough to license us this particular one. And the reason I chose this one over some of the others is because it reminds me of myself and my sister, who's a redhead. So it's for me, it's the two of us, me and my sis, the original Daughters. My feelings.
Some questions for you too.
I guess this was going to be a question for all three of you. Irene, you kind of answered it already, and Brittney just answered it as well. So Jennifer, what's the cover art here?
Oh, this has a story.
So it was a journey. It was a journey to get. The question was, what's the story behind this cover art? It took a long time to land on the right cover image. I don't need to get into all of that, but essentially what happened is that a colleague of ours at Airlie Press did some Google searching, and she said, oh, have you ever heard of this Anatolian goddess called the Shamaran? I was like, no, I've never heard of that. Anatolia, of course, the middle part of Turkey, the part that's on the Asian continent, right? So she's a mermaid-esque, a siren-esque figure from mythology, and then we did some Googling of that word, and we're looking at different images, and I came across the work of a woman in Istanbul, Turkish woman who lives in Istanbul and is an artist, and this was from one of her paintings. So I emailed her. Well, I stalked her online for a long time. She was hard to find, and she graciously allowed us to use that, her depiction of the Shamaran goddess on the cover.
I had a question. I think it could be applied to everyone, but Irene, you're the kind of inspiration for it. On page 53 of the poem, I am cracked plate, open face, and then fierce serrated and tomato flesh. And what I was going to ask is, when you write these, I know a lot of writers often read their work aloud, but is there a difference between how you're writing, what your process is when you're imagining, oh, this is going to be a spoken word poem versus this is just meant for people to read?
So the question is, it's a good one. When composing or constructing or building a poem, do I think of if it's going to be if it's going to be received as a spoken poem, or if it's a page poem, which is a great question, because I mean, in the best of all worlds, I want all of it. I want both. I want it to be something. I want it to be an experience on the page before people start understanding what the language actually says. But when it comes down to it, sound is everything. And I think part of most people's revision process, and definitely a part of mine, is to hear it constantly, hear it. Also, I mean, it's a sonnet, so there are going to be these 14 lines in which something needs to happen. And then this idea of metaphor, too. So if I'm thinking clearly, in this poem I'm thinking about food, which isn't unusual, quite usual, in fact. And what are the sounds, not only of the words, of the hard consonants of, say, a cracked plate, but what are the sounds that one actually experiences, with food? There's the cracking of an egg, there's the dropping a plate on the floor, and there's, the wordplay of, something like, what is serrated? So, these consonants and these vowels that start to come into my thinking about the poem are going to start to make some music, and then I'm going to lean into that. And I think some poems are more to be heard at their best moment. This, I think, maybe would be one of those. But the strive is also that it's going to work on a multimodal level. For example, I'm a real big fan of Meg Day, who is a deaf poet who talks very articulately about what that means. And she has this great story she tells where she was a grad student, a very ambitious grad student, sitting in the library memorizing, these sounds in these poems that she couldn't hear. But she would memorize them because that's, what you were supposed to do and how you were supposed to experience them. Eventually she looks up, she goes, diphthong, what the hell? She's like, you want me to read that, let alone hear it? I don't even hear that. And so the idea of point of entry, and as many points of entry as possible before I call a poem, or that's the goal, right? Before I call a poem revised, how can it be experienced? And is that in more than one mode?
Such a good.
I also want to say, where's daughters? So, because I have children who are hip and cool and whatever, it's like wet leg. Isn't this couldn't this be a cover for a wet leg? Anyway, I just wanted to. I also think this should be a silk one-shouldered palazzo pant jumpsuit that Jennifer should wear everywhere. But that's just my thought.
I have a question about process for each of you, because you all have lives. So you have 5 minutes or an hour or 2 hours. How do you segue into writing from the busyness of life?
Well, I want to talk about the composing that book, because it allows me to say that we need to give artists time and space. That's the point. So I was able to write most of that book because at that time I was working at a university of teaching, but I was given a 12-month salary, but I was only teaching 9 months. And for that particular summer of 2016, because of a variety of life events, I was, for the first time in my adult life, facing a summer where I wasn't working, but I was getting a salary, and I had time and space. And that was then compounded by in the middle of the summer, this global, well, for us it felt like this event happening that just sort of put my world in Turkey on pause for some time, right? And so I had the time and I had the space. I was alone for most of that summer. I left the capital, I went down to the coast purposefully to get away from parliament buildings getting bombed, and so there I was, I was in this beautiful remote location, not having to worry about money, not having to worry about food. I was at a place where they served me breakfast and dinner. I literally had time and space and funding to be creative. And that's how that worked for me. And so that is my pitch for funding artists in this country.
I'm just going to continue on that thread because, so I have gotten pretty good at I have a poem, my writing group's meeting tonight, I have to write something, I have my lunch hour. But I tend to carry a poem around in my head for a really long time before it hits the page, or the inklings of a poem. So usually I have some sort of nuggets to start with. But Daughters, I think because it was such a specific, what they call a project book, and kind of immersive in that way, I also had the gift of time at a couple of residency programs that were funded, that I wasn't having to pay to be there. So Mineral School is one of them, which I highly recommend to any artists out there. They take all sorts of artists, not just writers. And yeah, the 2 weeks is, it's most residency programs are a month or 6 weeks. I'm I can't do that. I work full time, I have kids, and so the residency programs that are out there that are 2 weeks or even 1 week, there's some that have parent residencies for 1 week. For me, that was an eternity of time, 2 weeks. They don't get that sort of time in my life. So Mineral School, yes, fed me 3 meals a day. I wasn't having to pay money to be there. I had the privilege of having a job that allowed me to take 2 weeks off. And so about half of Daughters was written there, and then it took me 5 years to write, so there were a lot of them that were just along the way over the course of a busy 5 years. And then it was completed at another residency at Playa in Summer Lake, where I'm headed this week for the short story collection. So yeah, so the gift of those 2 residencies really helped me get those done.
Well, I'm going to come from a green-eyed giant residency monster position of no one has said yes to me yet on that. But I'll tell you what, I do have a story that addresses this, I think. And one comes from the fact that I am I am no longer, but I used to be a margin writer. So with the other things that are happening in my life, and I've been a freelancer for some time, which means I have no schedule, and I have a 24-hour schedule, because like many freelancers, we don't understand time, except for deadline. Deadline we get. But a lot of things would happen when I was in a low residency, in the low residency program that was here. I didn't truly understand the idea of what I needed as an artist to drop into the work. So things were still fairly deadline oriented in that way. I wrote for people who had deadlines. That I understood. But when I used to, I was a professional chef for many years, and I had the wonderful opportunity to cook for the artist in residency at Caldera Arts. So I cooked them dinner on Thursday in a 3-week residency. And I'd go up on the first day and everybody was hugely enthusiastic. And I'm going to be talking mostly about the women here because that's kind of how it shook down. And they were visual artists, they were writers. The writers were particularly neurotic. That will come as no surprise. But first week, everybody's gung-ho. Embarrassment of time, all kinds of creative energy, gonna get all the projects done. This is the best gift. Second Thursday of week 1, people are just crying in their oatmeal. It's like, what is happening? I have all this time, I have no familial obligations, I'm away from work, what am I doing wrong? Just devastation. And then you come back on the next Thursday and the fog would have entirely lifted. They would have gone for walks in the hills. They would have gone into town to sing karaoke. You know, they would have just chatted in the kitchen, having a sandwich with someone at some point, talking maybe about their work, maybe not. And that third week just blew up, which is a glorious thing to watch. But always, you know, thinking about that first week when, you know, time is a complicated gift. And so, you know, back to that old saw, if it's worth doing badly. We were talking about this the other day. Motion is important to me. Motion is important. Thinking is hugely important. Metabolizing is hugely important. But doing the thing in the time I have, which varies, is what makes me right, ultimately.
Do you have any more questions? All right. Well, it's about 7 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and wrap up. So I just want to remind everybody that we have copies for purchase at the register, and then the authors will be signing their books. If you want to browse around the store for a few minutes while we're just tearing down, you're welcome to. I would just like to know, for my personal and our store benefit, who here has never been to Roundabout before? Raise your hand. Thank you. Please hope you'll come back again. And thank you everyone who's been here before and continues to support us. And please do come see us on our anniversary on Halloween. We'll have lots of candy. Thank you so much.